It's called Arcane Awakenings. It's an urban fantasy anthology, and it's 18 authors, it's 17 stories, and I love the short story that I wrote for this. I intended to write a short story that was like an urban fantasy prequel to like a post magical apocalypse book that I want to write. This was the near term thing that kicked off the whole business. And then I wrote it and I'm like, oh no, I wrote such a good character and sidekick that now I have to write this series.
Hello folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, and today we are going to be joined by guest Ben Schenkman, author of My Brother's Keeper and audiobook narrator. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Of course. You've kind of been all over the internet and such, and I was very lucky enough to get an early copy of My Brother's Keeper. Mm-hmm. Awesome book. Do show off that cover. You
mean this cover?
That's the one.
This cover right here. Also, just a sneak peek for people, because if you're buying this online, you can't see it, but the coloring on the spine is like really cool from the way they did the wrap.
Yeah, I love the colors of that cover. Like it's not a very complex cover. It's just showing the matchbox with the symbol on it, which we will not spoil what that is from the story. But it's very popping with its colors. Like it's very eye catching. Whoever did the design, whether it's yourself or someone else, they did a good job on it.
Yeah, I actually. All of my covers are done either by Get Covers or by Miblart. Get Covers being Miblart's like budget arm. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're willing to put in the time to work with them on going back and forth on revisions, you can get a very good, very, very good cover.
Nice. Yeah. Get Covers is one of those ones that I point a lot of people to, because a lot of authors, especially indie authors, are like, oh, covers are so expensive, I can't get a good one. I'm like, that is a prime example that you can get a cover at a very affordable price and it will be beautiful. Like, you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on it.
No, and frankly, you shouldn't, because especially when you're just getting started, and this gets into that whole hobbyist to professional. And like professional is always a funny word. You know, I have many other, I guess, alter egos, and I joke in the performances that I've done that being a professional means that you've been paid at least once. So, you know, but yeah, so one of the things that separates a professional looking book is its cover. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to love it, but it means that the cover has to look professional. And for everyone who says, I'm just going to do my own cover, even if you're a talented artist, that doesn't make you a cover designer. And a company like Get Covers can take a concept that you've given them and roll with that to make a very polished professional cover based on your concept too. So yeah, I think having a professionally designed cover is very important, and anyone who says they can't afford it, I think they can spend the $35 for Get Covers to do it for them.
I believe in you people. It's a harsh lesson, but you need to hear it. Like, the cover is just so important for a book. I've said it a bunch of times, but it's like 90% of your sales or something like that will come just because someone looked at your book and went, that's cool, and then they picked it up and gave it a chance. Especially when so much of your sales is not happening with you in person being there to be able to pitch it to them. It's important. Definitely got to put some effort into it. But what can you tell us about My Brother's Keeper, your latest novel that has come out?
Well, My Brother's Keeper is what I'm calling a Jewish urban fantasy, only because I want to put the Jewish part up front, because so much of the story itself is enmeshed with Jewish culture. And I don't mean that so Judaism is not a monolith. There are many different flavors and practices within it, But especially for anyone on like the East Coast of the United States who has any amount of experience with kind of modern Jewish culture, whether that's through TV or media of any kind, you're going to be at least like on the way to being comfortable with the content of the book. But I have found that there are some readers who have read it and said, I loved this story, but I do not know enough about Judaism to not have it spoon-fed to me in the way that I need it, which my book doesn't. That isn't to say that I don't describe things. I will usually make mention to a Jewish reference and then put in plain language, which is English. I'm just going to portmanteau those things together. What it is, you know, so if I use a Yiddish word like schlep, which is like to carry a heavy thing, I might say he schlepped down the street, you know, the load in his backpack or whatever. So I help you along. I give you context clues for like the Jewier bits in the book. And that is a trademarked term now, the Jewier bits. And but I want to make sure that people understand that that's the perspective that this is from. So the main character is Jewish, the family is Jewish. It opens on a Jewish funeral and then goes into them sitting Shiva, which is like a Jewish funerary practice of sitting with the family for a set number of days. But the story itself follows Max Asher, Jewish mystic and private eye, as he comes home to New Haven, Connecticut to bury his identical twin brother who has passed under very mysterious circumstances, and it just rolls from there. I can't go into too much without it being very spoilery, but I think that kind of sets the tone. It's urban fantasy because it's magic in an urban modern setting, but it very much has like noir crime vibes because not just the private eye, but also I opened the book in a cemetery in the rain to give it that kind of like heavy feel to it. So if you like any of those things I just talked about, even if you don't know a lick about Judaism, this is the book for you, audience.
Yeah, I went into the story, I knew very little about like Jewish religion, culture, or anything. And I actually did not know schlep was a Yiddish word. Like, this is a word that's a normal word in my vernacular that from my family and everything. And I had no idea that was a Yiddish word. The only thing that really threw me as far as like the Jewish culture and everything that you're throwing in there was that one particular dish where there's two types of the dish. And that was the only one that I had to be like, all right, I got to look this up. But everything else I felt like I had really good context around what was happening to really understand what was going into this. But I learned a lot about Jewish religion, Jewish folklore. It was really interesting. And that was all just nice flavoring around what was a really good mystery story. And I understand not being able to say much more than that because it's a mystery. You saying anything about it will ruin it. But I will tell the audience, like, it's really good, and the ending is fantastic. But I will not say more than that. Go read the book. It's really good.
Yeah, and this isn't to say that the book is not meant to be an education on Judaism. The book is meant to be a good mystery thriller, urban fantasy with magic that is like closer to magical realism. It's grounded in Jewish scripture. There is way more magic and demonology, angels and demons, and all of that in Jewish scripture, and specifically a book that's called the Talmud, and then some other assorted, errata, than anyone might expect. And I didn't have to scratch the surface too far to find all of the details there. But I also just have to give a shout out to a fantastic guy named Jack Zients, who is online as the Jewish Monster Hunter. And I found him while I was doing some research and reached out and asked if he would be interested in consulting on the book and reading an early copy of it to make sure that I got the magic right. And he was invaluable to the entire process. He sent me gigabytes of documentation and PDFs and everything that he's collected over the years, and we're already chatting, he and I, about the second book in the series as far as what direction I want to go in.
Yeah, and like I said, with the ending as spicy as it is, I'm very curious to see how you take that landing point and jump into something new, because there's a lot of cool directions that you could take it.
There are, and I feel like, so audience, it's a jaw-dropping twist, and you can't do that. Okay, it's hard to do that twice in a row. So the goal of the second book is not going to be a jaw-dropping twist necessarily, because it's you understand this, Michael, is you can't just keep one-upping yourself. Not everything can be more than the next. Like, the progression of someone as an author is that every book that you write theoretically should in some way be your best book, because you're learning and you're growing and you're honing your experience. I hesitate to call it the craft because I have a theater background, and calling anything the craft makes me feel pretentious. But it is, you're honing the craft of writing.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you have to one up yourself every book, because it's literally impossible to do that. And well-trod roads exist for a reason. So as long as you make the next book good, people will enjoy it. It doesn't, again, if I went into book 2 thinking, how am I going to top book 1? I think I would probably set myself up for failure, instead of just saying, how do I make this a good continuation of the story? I am tempted to put in an author's note at the beginning saying, I'm sorry, I can't do it twice in a row, and just leave it at that.
That, I don't think that would be not well received, though. That could be a nice little primer for it. I will say, though, a strategy that I think would really work in that kind of situation, that I've seen a few other authors do, is they'll do that big twist in some point of book 1, and then book 2 is a very different kind of book, very different tone of book, where it's just this is not a book about twists. Mm-hmm. This is a book where we're going to get a little more intimate into our characters, or we're going to explore this part of our world over here while telling you an entertaining and thought out story.
Yeah, and the plan for book 2 is actually right now to make the stakes bigger, because book 1 is very personal stakes. There are some larger elements to it that I can't go into, but nonetheless, it is very much a family and municipal citywide problem. And so book 2, instead of trying to one-up itself with the twist, is likely just to make the stakes and the problem, introduce it in a bigger way. So yeah, like you said, the funny thing is, I originally had planned on making... The reason why the series is called The Cycle of Ash is because I wanted it to be a cycle, in that each book was from a different main character's perspective. So we got book 1 from Max's perspective. Book 2 is going to be from a different character's perspective. But at this point, people love Max so much. I feel like I can't not do that. I feel like the readers might riot if I didn't continue the story with that character, for reasons that you, dear reader, will find out when you read the book. But yeah, so my current plan is to, instead of making it that deep personal twist, to make the story bigger.
Well, I'm definitely invested in Max's journey. I want to know how he moves on from book 1, and okay. I think we're going to stop teasing the audience at this point, kind of dancing around this issue. Go read the book. It's got an excellent twist, a great mystery throughout it. But what I wanted to ask you from the top here is, what sparked your passion for writing? I know that you do a lot of other artistic expressions, but what was it, or what moment or experience really led you to pursue authorship?
I'll start later, because a passion for writing isn't what spurred me into authorship or publishing. I've always written, and I've talked a lot about this on some of the other interviews that I've done, and it feels a little repetitive to say it again, other than I was writing stories at a young age. I was goth in high school and I wrote poetry, and then I didn't really do a lot of writing, frankly. Life gets in the way of a lot of those things, and our hobbies change. And for a very long time, my creative outlet was other things. I wrote the first draft of my first novel, My Boss is the Devil, which is the first book in the Devil You Know series. I wrote that a long time ago. And then I finished it in 2014. And then it sat on a shelf for 9 years while I did other things. And the thing that really reinvigorated me as an author, frankly, was getting back into publishing that one novel. So one of the things that got me back into being an author, frankly, were the advances in the feasibility of independent publishing. Because back when I wrote the story for the first time, it was not as respected as it is 10 years later, nearly 10 years later, because I drafted it in 2014, and then I didn't publish that book until the end of 2023. So, it was not 9-ish years later. And having that as an option, I dusted off the manuscript and edited it again because I had paid for a professional edit because I was serious about getting it out into the hands of agents and small publishers, and got zero interest in the book at the time, which is, I guess, saying something, because 9 years later, it's not like it's any easier to get the attention of agents and publishers. So the fact that I was going through this process and enjoyed it so much, I came up with the idea for a second book, which I then wrote in a very short period of time. And then I came up with the idea for a third book, which I then wrote. And then I had these other ideas for other books, and then I wrote them. So it really was a bit of it was, let's call it partial neurospicy hyperfixation and partial just enjoyment of feeling like I was doing well at something. People enjoyed my stories, and that encouraged me to keep writing. And the more that I wrote, the more ideas that I had, and the more support that I had from the fantastic community that is independent authors and self-publishing, and my friends as well. And that's really kind of what sparked my interest in being an author, and not just that guy that published a book that one time, and the more that I write, the more I just want to keep writing. My pace has settled down a little bit, but I'm still and maybe we can talk about this as far as that whole hobbyist to published, more professional author is, once you start developing a back catalog with multiple series in it, and especially if you start doing things like narrating your own audiobooks, I don't know what silly person would do that. There's only so much time in the day, especially since most of us can't do this full time, which I can't. And, you end up feeling a little bit more scattered. So I think I took us on a very long walk for a short drink of water, but I got into writing because I got back into writing. That was really what did it. It wasn't like my long-standing love of the craft. It was, I got back into it, and then it was a virus and I couldn't stop.
Yeah, all of that encouragement is really great for telling you, hey, this is the path, you are enjoying it, keep going. That validation is always very satisfying, especially since writing a book just takes a long time. It's a lot of effort without a lot of payoff that is very delayed. Eventually you will get a book out, and eventually people will start reading it, but you got to put a lot of effort into doing that. So it's always nice when you get that validation. During this whole process, and you now have, I want to say over 5 or 6 books that are out at this point. 6 books that are out at this point. at what point during all of this process did you actually feel like, okay, I am an author now? Because I know a lot of people, they really struggle with like imposter syndrome and be like, no, I'm just a hobbyist, or I'm just a writer, I'm not an author yet. At what point was it, yes, I'm an author for you?
Honestly, it was, I published the first book. And once you publish a book, you are a published author. But the reality is, even if you don't publish, you're still an author. And that's actually, I called you out about this online when you use the word aspiring. And that's actually like just from an emotional well-being and mental health standpoint, I think too many authors, as they are trying to get into their writing careers, for whatever reason, doesn't have to be for the money. It can simply be for the minor accolades we do or do not achieve on the way. Calling yourself an aspiring author minimizes your accomplishments of writing, because there are authors that have written reams of pages, thousands and thousands of words and pages, and they will never publish. And that doesn't make them less of an author. It makes them less of a published author. So I really didn't feel like an author until I published the book, but that's like my own thing. That was my own hang up about it. So, I would encourage anyone who is aspiring to stop being aspiring and simply be an author that is not published. But once you publish your first book, you are absolutely an author, and no one can ever take that away from you. I don't remember the exact statistics because there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. But, let's say I think it's less than 1% of the population will ever finish writing a book, let alone publishing a book, because even less people that write books publish them. And even less people that publish them publish more than one. The fact that I've published 6 books and 2 audiobooks at this point, and those take enough work that I really do count them as additional. So like I have 8 published works right now. Besides feeling wild beyond imagining for me, I really, you can't put yourself in the box of, well, I'm not really an author because I don't have 15 books out yet,
Yeah, I ask that question to almost every single guest that comes here, and everyone has always given me a very different answer. No one has the same answer. I do remember that conversation that we had where you called me out, and I will agree, at this point is 100% right. There's already so much against people who are trying to be an author. There's like, not even like the system is out to get you or anything like that, but there's just so many barriers that you have to overcome. Don't make yourself one of them. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's just something that I'm trying to internalize myself. And just speaking with you has really helped with that in those conversations that we've had so far. So I do appreciate it, Ben. Thank you so much.
I will be yours and everyone else's best cheerleader. That's one of the things that we have to remember, is that we're really out here supporting each other. If I felt like I was in competition with other independent authors, besides being miserable, I would also be unsuccessful, because independent publishing really is a rising tide lifts all ships, because
Exactly.
God forbid I help make urban fantasy more popular for independent authors, then I've done a good job. And the next independent urban fantasy author who has a little bit more success because someone read that Ben Schenkman book that time and thought maybe they'll give another one a try. Mm-hmm. There are so many books out there. The idea of being in competition, especially with independent authors. Now, traditional publishing, people may feel like they're in competition, but the reality is you're also still not, because there is no rhyme or reason for people getting picked up for traditional publishing these days. You could have 2 people with identical concepts, both equally well executed, going to 2 different agents, and they will both be rejected, or one will be rejected, or both will be accepted, or one will be accepted and then rejected. And you never know what's going to happen. So the best thing that we can do is support each other. and I'm here for that. You know, my door, my virtual door is always open. And beside, like, not just to you, but also to any indie author who's like, what do I do? What do I do here? Because if can I riff on something really quickly though?
Go for it. Take the stage.
This whole aspiring author thing, it actually, I think, often leads people to taking really bad advice, because if there is one thing the internet and specifically social media in independent author spaces is full of, it is advice, both good and bad. Also, often it's just very hyperbolic in that it's always do this or never do this, and there's no nuance applied to any of it because it's intended for 15 to 30 second social media bites. And like a trend that I've seen out here is aspiring authors who are like querying their books. They're trying to build their platforms to make agents notice them, because right now, one of the most horrible things about traditional publishing is that so many agents feel that social media is such an integral component to whether or not your book will sell, that many agents, not all agents, but many agents, the trend is that if you don't have a sufficient social media platform, you can't get picked up. And that has led to a lot of not published authors. And that doesn't mean that they're bad writers, but like they're offering this hyperbolic, curated advice as if they know better than you. And that leads to a lot of people picking that advice up as sacrosanct, because this is an author online. They call themselves an author online. They are an author. They're just not published yet. And they take this advice and then they internalize it, and it actually makes your writing less interesting or worse, you know? So you're an author, and just because someone else says they're an author and knows better than you, it doesn't mean that they do. So like take every piece of the internet with like a giant rock of salt.
Yeah, I think that can go forth for literally any content you find on the internet, though. Like, definitely think about the stuff that you are ingesting. When I started this show, Author Adjacent, I didn't really have a network of people to like reach out to and do like these interviews or stuff anymore, or at the time. So I started out this podcast as doing like little bite-sized lessons of I just learned about this, so I'm going to tell you about it. And I've since gotten further and further away from that because it can feel very difficult to give like an actual good, well-rounded lesson and be like, yes, I am an authority, you can trust me. But when really like I'm learning this just at the same time as you are, and I'm just trying to teach you a little bit about what I'd learned. Mm-hmm. And it can be very difficult to maintain that and keep it going and then keep it interesting on social media. And like you said, for like the bite-sized lessons. I was actually thinking about this this morning. I was going on a morning walk, and I was thinking about the lesson that everyone says about show versus tell. Like, you should always show and never tell. And that's not really the truth. The nuance is you should show most of the time, but narrative summary is a tool for a reason, and you should use it.
It is also, like, I'm sure you've heard, never use adverbs.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about my verbs that need adjectives? Like, how do I, because the reality is, the nuance of that statement is, don't use adverbs when a better verb will do. But if you are modifying a verb in a way that makes sense, you should absolutely use adverbs. Like Stephen King would say, don't use adverbs. His books are full of adverbs, and again, it gets down to the lacking nuance, and it's hard to separate that. I recently just saw a TikTok of someone talking about not show versus tell, but about filter words. Filter words are usually bad because they separate the reader from the experience. But if there's an intentionality with them in that I don't want you to focus on what they're experiencing, I want you to focus on what they're witnessing, then use a filter word. You know, I'm editing a manuscript right now, and I intentionally highlight filter words, and 9 times out of 10 I will replace them or get rid of them or rework it. But that 1 time out of 10 where I say, no, this works the best, I leave it, because that's intentionality. So like really the biggest lesson for independent authors is be intentional with your use of these things. They are rules of thumb for a reason, but that doesn't make them absolute.
Yeah, I feel like so many writing rules like that are very much like the pirate's code, where it's like, you should follow these probably most of the time, but there's a reason these rules can be bent. Like there's so many books that I've read where I read P.L. Stewart's A Drowned Kingdom. He goes on for several chapters worth of just narrative summary. And
Wow.
so much of that is just telling. And it's like, on paper, like just the idea of it, it sounds like it shouldn't work, but it's fantastic. He does a great job of making it interesting. So it's like, yes, all these rules, try to follow them, but you're following them because you understand why you're following them, and then break them where you need to. Be intentional, just like you're saying. This actually dovetails really well into my next question. As you've gotten across this process of writing 6 different books, how has your writing style really changed?
My editor thanks me. No, I mean in that I've learned as much from writing as I have from going through my editor's feedback on my writing. And you know, not everyone can afford a professional editor, and I'm not knocking people who self-edit. But we take feedback and we internalize it from wherever we get it. So whether it's an editor or whether it's a beta or an alpha reader or an ARC reader or your friend who's checking out your manuscript, my writing style, it's funny because there are people who will read my first book, like first book ever, and then they'll read the second book and they will say, I preferred the first book. And then there are people who will be like, I preferred the second book. And they're both right. You know, there's nothing wrong about having those opinions, but the first book has more flow because a lot of it is the internal monologue of the main character that you're going along for this journey. But the second book is technically a better written book because I learned things from editing, revising and publishing the first book that I then incorporated into my writing process. But then the third book, you know, some people will read the third book and say, this second book is like it was written by a different person between the first book and the third book, because like you keep integrating different pieces into your process. And the second book was the first one, like I had my first book professionally edited, but the second one is the first time I worked with my current editor, a fantastic author in her own right named Catherine McIntyre. And I learned enough things from getting the edits back on book 2 that I immediately then, when I started writing book 3, I'm incorporating some of those things. I'm you know, starting to use less, I'm using less filter words. I'm being more intentional with these choices. I'm getting, you know, more into maybe some deeper exposition. I don't know. You know, the third book is also the longest of the series thus far. The fourth book that I just finished drafting a few months ago is longer than that. So like my process is definitely evolving, and in turn it seems to be leading to me writing longer books. But I think mostly it's changes that make my editor happy because it means less work for her.
Oh, yeah. I handed off my editor a short story that I'm working on for one of these anthologies. And the first feedback that I got from her was, this is so much closer to the end than when we did your first book. And I'm just like, oh, thank God, I'm learning something.
Yes.
But I feel like every time an author touches a book, they're always trying to bring some kind of lesson from the previous book into it. From just everybody that I've talked to, So every book does feel different. And like you were saying earlier, you hope that your last book is the best thing you have produced so far. And that just comes from the accumulation of all the lessons that you learned from everything before that.
It's true, but they're also going to be different, and especially once
Yeah.
you start writing multiple series, like, who knows? Maybe for you, Crownfall is going to be a 15-book series. You're going to be the next Wandering In, and that's the only thing you're ever going to write, and that's fine. But like, once you start branching out into other things, so like the short story that you're writing, if it's not in the same universe, you're already getting a taste of, oh, well, this is different because I was in these characters' heads and now I'm in this one, and this is fundamentally different than what I've done before. And so it's going to affect the way you do things. So like, I keep jumping back and forth. Every time I finish a book in a series, the next book I write is not the next one in that series. So I wrote My Brother's Keeper after I wrote the first book in the Chronicles of Corbin Pierce, which is a different urban fantasy series that I wrote. But then after My Brother's Keeper, which was that gritty noir urban fantasy with the private eye, I wrote book 4 of The Devil You Know, which dives back into, it's a dark comedy with these sarcastic, like, there's always sarcasm. We'll just lay that out there. But these are very intentionally coping with the world through dark humor types of characters. And I'm still applying things that I learned writing My Brother's Keeper to book 4 of this totally different series, but it comes out in different ways. It's hard to describe. Like, at this point, I don't feel like I'm actively incorporating so much as just incrementally growing and changing in ways that I couldn't describe if you paid me money to do so. Because now I'm just writing. So it's like, oh, I wrote another book. Well, what did you learn from the last one? I don't know, but I hope it shows.
Yeah. So you have all these theories and you're pulling different things from them, but you always have sarcasm as a type of humor in all your books. Is there any other unifying factor that brings all your books together, like a theme that you keep revisiting or a type of character that you keep inserting?
This kind of touches a little bit on an article that you wrote, because you're working on, grimdark was really big, or still is really big as a genre, but you're doing noble dark fantasy, right? In that the characters have a core of goodness to them, and choices are made with noble intentions. That doesn't mean that everyone is like shiny and bright and paladins and all that stuff, but it means that the focus of the characters is making right choices from maybe more of an ethical standpoint. Lawlessness, whatever. I'm not talking about laws, but I'm talking about like base core human ethics and goodness, My characters almost all operate from that same kind of noble intent, even if they're just like a sarcastic idiot. They're like still like my main character in my first series, Nick. He is a lovable man that makes questionable choices, but it's always with this like heart of gold wrapped up in his sarcastic way of looking at the world. So I it's part of me too. It's just kind of how I've tried to be as a human being. And that really is a consistent thread. I have a lot of consistent themes of, things not being as simple as people think they are. We don't always understand what good and evil is. The good isn't always good. The bad isn't always bad. But my main characters still operate from usually being part of that desire for goodness and betterment. I actually had a reviewer refer to my series as Noble Bright, and I had never heard anyone refer to my books like that before, but like it hit me in like a warm spot in my chest somewhere that like it felt okay. Like that doesn't mean that they don't make bad choices. That doesn't mean that there aren't some questionable things that they do. You read My Brother's Keeper. You know how far Max will go in order to solve the mystery. But that doesn't mean that he isn't doing it from a place of that noble intention. I think that's where a lot of people don't understand what morally gray characters are really supposed to be. In my mind, like I really think of morally gray characters as that noble dark or noble bright. Like the whole point is, if there isn't some sort of core of good intent in a morally gray character, then are they not just a sociopath? So everyone loves morally gray characters, and like you can have them and that's fine. Like Max is kind of a morally gray character because he will do things that are maybe against certain moral codes, but he's still trying to be a good person. And like that's the kind of morally gray character that I love. That's why, like, you know, for if you're talking about media, like Firefly, the noble thief, that kind of morally gray anti-hero, like anti-hero still has hero in it. And people skip that. They're just like, no, it's a morally great character. Okay, but like, are they heroic? No, absolutely not. I'm like, oh, then why am I rooting for them? Oh, because they're like evil. I'm like, nope, no, that's the wrong direction for me. So I want my anti-heroes to be heroic in that going against the grain kind of way. So yeah, long story short, I feel like there's a consistent theme of that core of goodness in my stories and my characters. And so far, I can't really shake that.
I love that. Like, one, you absolutely nailed what I was talking about in that article, like 100%. We just need more characters to root for. Like, I love getting into like a dark character and stuff like that, but I am just a little oversaturated with it. So it is nice to see more examples of that. And great pull on the Malcolm Reynolds Firefly, because that right there
I
is
noticed that.
the Liberty Hammer from Malcolm Reynolds himself. Like, it's 3D printed that I did it for Halloween one year, dressing up as him. So fun. But we are nearing towards the end of our time on this first episode. I did want to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, what excites you most about the next stage of your author journey? Whether it's a certain project that you're going into or a new area that you're looking to explore, what's on the horizon for you?
I have so much on the horizon right now. Do you want it alphabetically or categorically?
Whatever you're most excited about.
So I'm honestly most excited about some anthologies that I'm going to be a part of. One of which that I don't think we can talk about, but we're involved in. We'll happening. We'll be there. But one that I can talk about, because I am not just a part of it, I'm also one of the organizers for it. It is an anthology that will be going live on Kickstarter in the fall, early fall. And you should go to my social media and go follow the campaign today. It's called Arcane Awakenings. It's an urban fantasy anthology. And it's 18 authors, it's 17 stories, and I love the short story that I wrote for this anthology. I did not intend to write a book. So I intended to write a short story that was like an urban fantasy prequel to like a post magical apocalypse book that I want to write. So like this was the near term thing that kicked off the whole business. And then I wrote it and I'm like, oh no, I wrote such a good character and sidekick that now I have to write this series. So like I did it to myself, but I have an absolutely delightful short story in this Arcane Awakenings, and the theme of it, it does what it says on the tin. The whole idea is that the stories are about, in each of them, the theme is some kind of awakening of magic or the emergence of magic, which is, I think, a really cool idea, because everything starts in the middle. We're in a world that magic always existed in. Okay, but like, how did it get started? And this is kind of what it's intended to be, maybe a little bit different than the norm. So I think that's the thing that's coming up that I'm most excited about, other than like the 10 other things that I have going on right now.
No, I'm excited for that anthology as well. When we get closer to you guys launching that, I believe we're going to have you and a few other of the organizers actually on this show to talk about it. So great introduction to like little seed that I think we're going to be having you guys on, I want to say August. So definitely looking forward to that.
I hope so. I will be there.
Excellent. I think we're about at time for this episode. Ben, can you tell the people where can they find you? Where can they find your books?
Yeah, you can find me at benschenkman.com. I realize that's hard to spell, and I apologize. But you can also find me on social media. On my website, I do have a links page where you can find all of my socials there. You can find my books. The ebooks are tied to the Amazon ecosystem because all of my stories are in Kindle Unlimited. So it is accessible for people who are already paying for that subscription. But you can get my paperbacks and hardcovers wherever it is that you prefer to buy your physical media. Those are available widely. And then the first 2 audiobooks for my first series are widely available wherever you like to purchase your audiobooks from, with the third coming later this year.
Excellent. And we'll have a lot of that stuff linked down below, including how to spell your name in the episode title. Ben, thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. This has been great.
Of course. And folks, remember, until next time, let's be author adjacent together. See ya. And we did the thing.
We did the thing.